As you all might have been able to see, I have been shifting projects around lately, and I have felt quite energetic today and yesterday compared to a few other days, and I've just felt this was a good opportunity to kind of get caught up on some video projects as much as anything else. And since coming back on here last and doing the last video about sewing this whale, I've kind of set aside and I've been back and forth from the camera to try to do a carving video as well of a new project there. And what I'd like to say is that I felt a little boost of energy right now to come on here and to try to continue this video about sewing the whale. And there's a little information I've come along to share. First of all, these pieces here have already been cut out. But there is a certain trick to sewing it, I will say. When you're doing some denim that is thick like this, there is a certain thick needle that you want to use. Because otherwise, if you use a needle that is too small to try to sew it through the denim, the toughness of the denim will make the knot break off the needle, and it will not work as well when you try to sew it. So that's why I show you all it's best to use that big needle. And there will be times when sometimes you might need to tie several knots into it just to make it tight enough. And there will be those moments when the knot might come undone while you're working on it. I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, it is fairly simple just to, even with the long piece of thread sticking out of the fabric, to just moisten it and re-thread it. It's simple for me. Now, what I come to demonstrate here is that there is a certain way I have of doing this. Something that I like to do is to take all three pieces, and first of all, you're going to have to figure out how to do this to keep how to do first the knots that hold together these pieces and then the knots that attach this piece to the bottom. But I like to start out by putting a knot at every corner and curve. That way, that makes it so that the pieces can hold together much more easily while you're sewing along on it. And that way, you don't get too confused and take one piece of the pattern or one part of the sewing so far that you can't accomplish the next part. So there's a little ways this comes along, and there's a place at the front of the nose, there's places at the back of the tail here. It's probably most important that when you're just doing these pieces that you get it at the nose and the back of the tail first. But there may come times when, if you feel like you need it to be a little more secure than that, you can probably kind of do it at the top of the head or at the back of the whale as well. It shall go very strong, and it shall be very gentle, and when you come along to it, take it where you will need it the most. So that is what I am doing here and here and in the three places where I find it most essential. One thing I do need to mention is there will be times when sometimes the thread will get hung up a little bit, like it's kind of doing here. Sometimes it'll just be simple to unwind it and kind of, well, and sometimes there will be moments when it will break on you just like it just did on me. But I'd say we've pretty much taken care of this part. We can go on to the next. All I really have to do is rethread the needle here, because there can come times with this denim when it can get a little bit difficult when you're kind of getting it through. Sometimes the thread will just unravel there a little bit. Sometimes knots will get in it. There's a special trick you can do to, when you get a knot in it, there will be a big loop come out, and you can just kind of tie a knot around the loop and just keep going. You might end up having a little less of a piece of thread to work with that way, but when it happens, it just absolutely cannot be helped. So I'd say here's how we're going to go along on this. We are now attaching the underside to the top. So what I'm going to do first here is to tie little knots in here at the little middle of its heart-shaped tail. In real life, whales don't have a heart-shaped tail, at least not always. Some breeds might. I have yet to look into them and find out about that, but I've always just, I mean, some of the first things that I ever sewed before I did animals was little heart-shaped pillows, as were just simple to make, simple to do, and more than that, you know, I always loved the people I was making them for. I always thought a lot of these people. Sometimes I just made little hearts for them just to show them how special they were, and just to kind of show what the meaning of I choose charity over bitterness was. That little slogan I put on things. So, as we're coming to see here, I have made some knots in the middle of this heart here, and now there's going to be a time when it comes when, let's say, at the two corners of the tail, we can go ahead and add in the knots. The places on here where the tail attaches to the body. That is the next little corner or curve or point at which we are going to place a piece of thread through here and make another knot come in just like this, and try to get it sturdy and stable where it's just pretty much all together here, and we can kind of make it so it's ready to go, ready to sew. So I've just made another knot in there, and next thing you know, we come down to this little part, and this little knot here that comes right here at the little triangle at the end of the tail, it kind of is on the other side, and you want to kind of do it once for each side here, and because that's what makes it roll along and makes it look more cuddly and exotic both at the same time. So here, this is the front and this is the underside of that. The good place to start next would be probably at the points of the fins. You see the fin here. There's a place down here at the curve of the fin where I like to place a knot in here to go further along about it. This is the way I started out. It just kind of got to be a little more work and it got to be a little better, and I got a little further on the further I took it. Sometimes I could do a little bit more than that all at once, just depending on the time, the project, depending on my experience. But this is how it goes along. It goes along so well. And that's how I made this. There is a place where the fin attaches to the body, and in both the front and back of the fin, that would be the next step that you take. You can start on either the front or the back, doesn't matter which. You can go whichever way you like with it, take it whichever way you like to go, and it will come along so good. It'll just make a little place for you here, and got to come along on the next place here, take it a little further, make it go a little further along, and make the fin hold still, stay in place, because this is the way that the project and the sewing of the denim works. I kind of thought what was so good about this was when I first started making the dolphins and whales, I was out at autism walks selling the things, and I heard from people who were buying them that there came a time when the cats and the dogs were playing with them so much more than the children were. On this end, I'm going to do it a little different. On this side, I'm going to start at the front end of the fin, at the place where it attaches to the body, and go on to the curve at the end of the fin later on. There might even be those moments when, once you kind of get it together on one side, this might be the better and simpler way to do the other side. And as we come along, here's the next place we go. Up, up and away, trying to sew the little place through and make it so wonderful and shiny and aquatic. Now, I will say, unlike the way I use the word aquatic, you can't put these whales into water. They are not water toys. They are just kind of probably more like the type that once they get wet and stay wet for too long, might get a little too moldy. They might be like most stuffed animals. I'd say the better animals to put in water, toy ones, that is, any kind of toy to put in water is a plastic one. You can even do that with something that is a plastic toy of what's not even a water animal. A little interesting fact there. But I come a little further along on this, sew it along, move it along, merrily we roll along, and comes into a place where the knots make it firm. Now, there comes a place also where you see the front of the underside meets up with the top side to make its mouth. There's a place where you want to apply a little thread stitching in there, and this is something where basically you can do both sides at once, depending on how it goes, depending on how it works. It'll just show you the little lines and what you need to do and where you need to go, where you must take it. The light shall shine in all places, and it's almost like the sun shining on the beach. I've never been to the beach in real life, but I know a lot of people who have. I've heard a lot of songs about it, seen a lot of movies about it, seen a lot of videos of it, and I mean, I tell you, I know from what you all could tell me, it doesn't compare to actually being there, but it just all depends on what each of us have had the chances to do in life. I mean, if you think it's sad, it's okay for you to think that, but it don't bother me too much. I tell you, a lot of people think I'm missing out on things, but I'd say if I was ever meant to, if I was ever interested, I probably would have found a way to have gone already. And I'd say, for one thing, the fact is that we all see something in somebody's life that we think we're missing, and we see somebody without something in our life that we think they're missing. Sometimes I think that people who aren't crafty, well, what they tell me is they wish they could be crafty, but I tell them we all see something in somebody else that we wish we could be. Everybody can't be good at everything. I think given this moment, I'm going to go ahead and make a little stitch at the top of the head, and I am only doing that because I have a reasonable amount of thread for it still left on the needle. Sometimes after you kind of get to a certain point where you've done a reasonable amount of sewing for a certain spot, you can always use thread that is left on the needle if it's enough to fill in just little jobs, but not enough to do a big job. You can always kind of, just do a little extra with that just so it doesn't go to waste, and just so you can kind of simplify your project for you a little more. It might actually slow the process a little bit, but it's like they always say that sometimes when you go too fast, you don't make it come out as good. But I mean, the way I was taught growing up was when you kind of do things that it comes out much neater and so much nicer when you actually take your time. It was hard for me when I was a kid. I tell you, I always wanted to do things so fast they didn't come out as neat, and then I was always around some other kids who kind of took their time with it and made it come out nicer, because we were all different. We were all different in different ways as kids. We all had different weaknesses, different strengths, and I mean, things that were harder for some of us were easier for others of us, and vice versa. But I can kind of tell by looking at the time on the video that I've been on here for quite a while. So I'm thinking I'm going to end this session for today and sort of like put these pieces of project aside so that I can show you a little more. and demonstrate the next time I get on. Goodbye.